Admiral Marcus Kane stared at the sensor display and felt his heart sink. 300 red dots filled the screen, each one representing a Corvani warship. Behind him, the bridge crew of the Defiant worked quietly at their stations. Nobody spoke about what they all knew. This was going to be their last battle. Kane was 52 years old and had spent 30 years in the Terran Defense Fleet. He had seen humanity spread across the stars, building colonies on distant worlds and making contact with alien species. Some had been friendly, others had been neutral. The Corvani were neither. They came to conquer and destroy, and they were very good at both. The communication officer looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the other ships. All captains report ready for battle." Her voice was steady, but Kane could see the fear in her eyes. Everyone knew the odds. 12 human ships against 300 alien vessels. Should have been laughable. The Corvani ships were bigger, stronger, and carried more weapons. Each one could probably take on 2 or 3 human ships and win. But Kane had stopped laughing about anything 3 days ago when Earth's orbital defenses had fallen. He walked to the communication console and opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Admiral Kane. I won't lie to you. We're outnumbered 25-1. Oh. The enemy has better shields, bigger guns, and more ships than we can count. By all military logic, we should surrender right now." Kane paused and looked around. The bridge, his crew was listening to every word. "But we're not going to surrender. We're not going to run. We're not going to let these bastards destroy what's left of humanity without a fight. Every one of you volunteered for this mission. Every one of you knew it was probably suicide. And every one of you is here anyway because you're human, and humans don't give up." Captain Lisa Torres spoke from the Vengeance. "We're with you, Admiral. Our crew is ready to show these aliens what humans do when they're angry." Lieutenant Commander. Alex Reed's voice came through from the Retribution. "Our experimental weapons are charged and ready. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as we can." One by one, the other ship commanders reported in. Captain David Park from the Fury, Captain Emma Walsh from the Vindication, Captain Rose Chen from the Phoenix. Each voice was calm and determined. They all knew they were probably going to die, but none of them cared anymore. The Corvani had made a mistake when they destroyed the colonies. They had killed billions of innocent people, including families of many of the crew members in this small fleet. Women, children, elderly people who had never hurt anyone. The aliens had shown no mercy. Now they would receive none in return. Kane returned to his command chair and studied the tactical display. The Corvani fleet was arranged in a standard attack formation. Big ships in the center, smaller ones. On the flanks, with their command vessels protected in the rear, it was efficient and had worked for them in dozens of previous invasions. But they had never fought humans before. "Navigation, plot a course that takes us through the asteroid field," Kane ordered. "If we're going to die, we're not going to make it easy for them." The navigation officer's fingers flew over her controls. "Course plotted, sir. The asteroids will provide some cover, but not much. It doesn't need to be much," Kane replied. "Just enough to make them work for their victory." The Corvani fleet began moving toward them. Even from this distance, Kane could see the massive ships accelerating. Their hulls were dark metal covered in weapon ports and shield emitters. Each one looked like a floating fortress designed for one purpose: destroying everything in its path. Kane opened a channel to the engineering section. "Chief Miller, how are our engines holding up?" "Tom." Miller's voice crackled through the speakers. "Running at 90% efficiency, sir?" "I can push them harder if you need me to. Save that for when we really need it," Kane said. "We're going to need every advantage we can get." The tactical officer called out from his station. "Sir, the Corvani fleet is spreading out. They're trying to surround us." Kane nodded. It was exactly what he had expected. The aliens had overwhelming numbers, so they would use them to attack from all sides at once. It was good strategy against a normal fleet. But Kane wasn't planning to fight a normal battle. "All ships prepare for emergency acceleration on my mark." He broadcast to the fleet. "And we're going to hit them before they can complete their encirclement." Minutes crawled by as the two fleets moved closer together. Kane could feel the tension on the bridge growing thicker. His crew had trained for this moment their entire careers, But training was different from reality. Training didn't include the knowledge that Earth was gone and humanity was facing extinction. The communication officer spoke up again. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Corvani flagship. They're demanding our surrender." Kane almost smiled. "Put it on the main screen." The view screen flickered and showed the face of Supreme Overlord Thax. The alien was tall and reptilian, scales that gleamed under the lights of his command bridge. His eyes were cold and showed no emotion as he spoke. "Human fleet, this. His Supreme Overlord Thax of the Corvani Empire, your world has fallen, your colonies are destroyed, your species is finished. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Continue to resist, and we will make your suffering last for days." Kane stood up and faced the screen. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet. I have a message for you and your empire." He paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch out. "Go to hell." The transmission ended, and the screen went dark. Around the bridge, Kane's crew straightened in their chairs. They had heard their admiral's answer. It was exactly what they had hoped for. Kane sat back down and gripped the arms of his command chair. "All ships, battle stations. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far." Distance between the fleets continued to shrink. Soon the shooting would start, and most of the people in these 12 ships would be dead. But they would not die quietly, and they would not die easily. The Corvani were about to learn that humans were different from every other species they had conquered. The fleet was small, but it carried something the aliens had never encountered before. It carried human wrath, and that was about to change everything. The first Corvani missiles came screaming toward the human fleet at exactly 0800 hours. Kane watched the bright streaks of light racing across the darkness of space and felt time slow down around him. This was it. This was where humanity would either survive or die. "All ships execute Ghost Protocol," Kane ordered into his communicator. Around him, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had drilled this maneuver hundreds of times, but never with live weapons pointed at them. The 12 human ships suddenly scattered in all directions like leaves blown by a hurricane. The Corvani had expected them to group together for mutual protection, as most species did when facing overwhelming odds. Instead, the humans split apart and became 12 individual targets, moving in unpredictable patterns. "Captain David," Park's voice came over the communication channel from the Retribution. "Beginning phase drive activation. Or see you on the other side, Admiral." Kane watched on his tactical display as the Retribution simply vanished. One moment it was there, the next it was gone completely. The experimental phase drive technology had been installed on only 3 of their ships, and nobody was sure if it would actually work in combat. Now they were about to find out. The Corvani missiles that had been targeting the Retribution flew through empty space and exploded harmlessly. Kane could imagine the confusion on the alien command ships as their sensors showed impossible readings. Ships didn't just disappear in the middle of space, but human ships apparently did. The Retribution reappeared directly behind the largest Corvani dreadnought, less than a kilometer from its engines. Captain Park didn't waste time with fancy maneuvers. His ship opened fire with everything it had, pouring concentrated energy into the alien vessel's most vulnerable spot. The dreadnought's engines exploded in a brilliant flash of light, and the massive ship began spinning out of control. Before the Corvani could react, the Retribution vanished again. "Holy shit," someone whispered on the bridge of the Defiant. Kane didn't bother to identify who had spoken. Was too busy watching the tactical display and feeling something he hadn't felt in days. Hope Captain Lisa Torres and Captain Rose Chen were working together in perfect coordination. The Vengeance and Phoenix moved through the enemy formation like dancers, their crews having trained together for years. They used their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the massive alien weapons while striking at critical systems. With surgical precision, the Corvani ships were built for overwhelming firepower, not for chasing small, fast targets. Their weapons were designed to destroy other capital ships in long-range duels, not to track fighters darting between their legs like angry wasps. Every time they tried to concentrate their fire on one human ship, 2 others would appear from unexpected angles, and tear into their flanks. Kane opened a channel to Chief Miller in engineering. "Tom, I need everything you can give me. We're going in." "Engines are already at 110%, sir," Miller replied. "I can push them to 120, but I can't promise they won't explode." "Do it," Kane ordered. "If we don't take risks now, we won't live long enough to regret them." The Defiant surged forward with sudden acceleration that pressed everyone on the bridge back into their seats. Kane aimed his ship directly at the center of the Corvini formation, where their command vessels were clustered together for protection. It was a suicide run by any reasonable measure. But Kane had stopped being reasonable 3 days ago. The alien ships turned their weapons toward the approaching flagship, filling space with energy beams and missile trails. Kane's tactical officer called out damage reports as their shields absorbed hit after hit. "Forward shields down to 60%. 50%. Hold course," Kane ordered. "We're not turning back." The Defiant's weapons officer was a young man named Billy Nash, who had graduated from the academy only 6 months ago. He should have been terrified, but instead he seemed calm and focused as he targeted the enemy ships. "Firing solution locked on the command cluster, sir." "All weapons ready. Fire everything," Kane said. The Defiant's particle beams and quantum torpedoes struck the Corvini command ships in a concentrated barrage. Kane had gambled that the aliens would position their most important vessels together for mutual protection. And he had been right. The combined firepower of his flagship tore through their shields and carved deep wounds in their hulls. But the real surprise came when the retribution appeared again. This time in the middle of the command cluster itself. Captain Park had somehow managed to phase jump his ship directly into the enemy formation, where their own ships couldn't fire at him without hitting each other. His weapons blazed at point-blank range, crippling 2 more command vessels before he vanished again. Supreme Overlord Thax watched from his flagship as his carefully planned attack dissolved into chaos. The humans were fighting like nothing he had ever encountered before. They showed no fear of death, no respect for overwhelming odds, and no willingness to follow conventional tactics. Each human ship seemed to be operating independently, yet they worked together with impossible coordination. His tactical officer reported from across the command bridge. "Sir, we've lost 12 ships in the first 20 minutes. Our formation is broken, and our ships are reporting confusion in their targeting systems." Thax stared at the tactical display showing the battle. The human ships appeared as small blue dots moving through his fleet like sharks among fish. They struck without warning, inflicted maximum damage, and disappeared before his forces could respond effectively. It was not the kind of battle he had been trained to fight. "Order all ships to close formation," he commanded. "We'll crush them with concentrated firepower." But as his ships moved closer together, they discovered another problem with fighting humans. Captain Emma Walsh's Vindication had been badly damaged in the opening exchange. But instead of retreating or surrendering, she ordered her ship directly into the path of the closing Corvini formation. Her crew overloaded their reactor and turned their ship into a guided missile. The explosion when the Vindication struck the Corvini heavy cruiser lit up space like a small sun. The blast took out not only the cruiser but also damaged 3 other ships that had been moving in close formation. Walsh and her crew were gone, but they had proven a point that would echo through Corvini military doctrine for generations too. Come, humans would rather die fighting than live in defeat. Kane watched the explosion from the bridge of the Defiant and felt something cold settle in his chest. Emma had been a good friend and an excellent officer. Her death would not be forgotten, and it would not go unavenged. "All ships, continue evasive maneuvers," he broadcast to the remaining fleet. "Make them pay for every shot they take." The battle continued to rage across thousands of kilometers of space. The Corvini still had overwhelming numbers, but their advantage was being whittled away by human determination and tactical innovation. They had expected to fight a conventional space battle against a defeated enemy. Instead, they found themselves struggling against an opponent that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. The humans fought like cornered animals, and the aliens were beginning to understand that perhaps they had made a terrible mistake in threatening this particular species. But it was too late to stop now. The battle would continue until one side or the other was completely destroyed. For hours into the battle, Kane stood on the bridge of the Defiant and watched his fleet dying around him. The tactical display showed only 8 human ships remaining, each one damaged and running on borrowed time. But the Corvani had paid a heavy price for their advantage. Over 60 alien vessels floated dead in space, and many more showed critical damage. The communication officer looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Thunder." Last transmission indicated they were being overwhelmed by 5 Corvani destroyers. Kane closed his eyes for a moment. Captain Robert Stone had commanded the Thunder, and he had 3 young children back on Earth, or he had before Earth fell. Kane pushed the thought away. There would be time to mourn later if there was a later. "Acknowledged," Kane said quietly. "Continue monitoring all frequencies." Chief Miller's voice crackled through the intercom from engineering. "Admiral, we've got problems down here. The reactor is running at dangerous levels, and our engine coolant is almost gone. I can keep us going for maybe another 2 hours before we start taking permanent damage." "Do what you can, Tom," Kane replied. "We just need to hold together a little longer." But Kane wasn't sure what they were holding together for. The original plan had been to make the Corvani pay so heavily for their victory that other alien races would think twice before attacking humanity. That part was working. The problem was that humanity might not survive long enough for it to matter. Captain Lisa Torres contacted him from the Vengeance. Her ship had taken heavy damage to its forward sections, and half her crew was dead or wounded. "Marcus, we're not going to last much longer. My weapons are down to 30% efficiency, and we've lost most of our armor plating." "Can you still fight?" Kane asked. "We can still fight," Torres replied without hesitation. "My crew won't quit while there are still aliens to kill." That was the thing about humans that the Corvani couldn't understand. Any other species would have surrendered by now, or at least tried to negotiate some kind of settlement. But humans got more dangerous when they were hurt, more determined when they were desperate, and more willing to take risks when they had nothing left to lose. Retribution phased back into normal space near the Defiant, and Kane could see the damage it had taken. Captain David Park's ship looked like it had been through a meat grinder. Hull plates were missing, weapon ports were sealed with emergency patches, and atmosphere was venting from at least 3 different locations. "David, you need to get your people to safety," Kane said over the communication channel. "Negative," Admiral Park replied. "My ship can still phase jump, and my weapons are still functional. We're staying in the fight." Kane wanted to order him to retreat, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Park's family had been on one of the colony worlds that the Corvani had destroyed. The man had nothing left to live for except revenge, and Kane understood that feeling completely. The tactical officer called out from his station. "Sir, the Corvani are reforming their attack pattern. It looks like they're going to try a concentrated assault on our position." Kane studied the display and saw that the alien commander was learning from his mistakes. Instead of trying to overwhelm the human ships with numbers, Supreme Overlord Thax was concentrating his remaining forces into tight formations that could support each other. It was smarter tactics, and it would probably work. "All ships, prepare. For defensive formation Delta," Kane ordered. "We're going to make our stand here." The remaining human vessels moved into position around the Defiant. They had practiced this formation many times, but never with so few ships, and never while already damaged. The idea was to create overlapping fields of fire that would protect each ship while maximizing their combined firepower. In theory, it should allow them to hold out longer against superior numbers. The Corvani attack came like a tidal wave of energy and metal. 200 remaining alien ships moved forward in perfect coordination, their weapons blazing in unison. Space filled with the light of energy beams and the trails of guided missiles. The human defensive formation held for exactly 43 seconds. The Hurricane was the first to break. Captain James Miller had pushed his ship beyond its limits. And when the Corvani concentrated fire on his position, his shields failed catastrophically. The ship exploded in a ball of superheated plasma that briefly outshone the local star. The storm lasted another 30 seconds before a Corvani torpedo punched through its weakened armor and detonated inside the engineering section. Captain Patricia. Davis had just enough time to broadcast a final message Tell them we were here. Tell them we fought." Kane watched his officers die and felt something break inside his chest. These were good people, brave people who had volunteered for this mission knowing it was probably suicide. They deserved better than dying in the empty void of space, while their home world burned behind them. But the anger that filled him wasn't the hot rage of the moment. It was something colder and more dangerous. It was the fury of a species that had been pushed beyond its breaking point, and was now ready to show the galaxy what that really meant. "Navigation, plot a course directly through the center of their formation," Kane ordered. "Best possible speed." The navigation officer looked at him with confusion. "Sir, that's a suicide run. We won't survive the concentrated fire." "Yes, we will," Kane said quietly. "Yes, we're not going to give them time to concentrate their fire." He opened a channel to the remaining ships. "This is Admiral Kane. We're down to 6 ships, and we're all running on fumes. The conventional tactics aren't working anymore, so we're going to try something unconventional. We're going to ram them." Captain Rose Chen's voice came from the Phoenix. "Admiral, are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," Kane replied. "They want to destroy humanity? Fine. But they're going to learn that humans don't go quietly into the night. We go down fighting, and we take as many of them with us as we can." 6 remaining human ships formed up behind the Defiant and began accelerating toward the Corvani fleet at maximum speed. Kane could feel the G-forces pressing him back into his command chair as Chief Miller pushed the engines beyond their safety limits. Around him, his bridge crew worked with grim determination, knowing that these would probably be the last few minutes of their lives. The Corvani fleet opened fire with everything they had, but the human ships were moving too fast and in too tight. A formation for effective targeting. Energy beams seared past them, and missiles exploded around them. But the 6 ships held their course and continued to accelerate. Supreme Overlord Thax watched from his flagship as the tiny human fleet charged directly at his forces. It was insane, suicidal, and completely against every rule of space combat he had ever learned. It was also terrifying because he was beginning to realize that these humans really would rather die than surrender. "All ships, concentrate fire. On the lead vessel," he ordered. "Stop them before they reach our formation," but it was too late. The human ships had built up too much speed and momentum to be stopped by weapons fire. They smashed into the Corvani formation like a hammer striking glass. And everything changed. The battle was far from over, but Kane knew that the galaxy would remember this day. They would remember the small fleet that had shown the mighty Corvani Empire what human wrath really looked like. The collision between the human fleet and the Corvani formation created chaos that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Kane felt the Defiant shudder as it smashed through the outer line of alien ships, its reinforced hull carving through their lighter armor like a sword through paper. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as damage reports flooded in from every section. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, the damage control officer reported. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we've lost atmospheric pressure." In the forward sections, Kane gripped his command chair as the ship continued to shake from weapons fire and debris impacts. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to keep their ship operational while massive Corvani vessels fired at them from all directions. It should have been suicide, but somehow they were still alive and still fighting. The tactical display showed the aftermath of their desperate charge. 3 human ships had been destroyed in the collision, but they had taken 8 Corvani vessels with them and shattered the alien formation completely. The remaining 3 human ships were now deep inside the enemy fleet, surrounded by hostile forces, but still very much alive. Lieutenant Billy Nash looked up from his tactical station with something that might have been excitement in his eyes. "Admiral, I'm reading something strange in the Corvani formation. Their command ships are clustered together, but their defensive arrangement is creating a gap in their shield coverage." Kane moved to Nash's station and studied the readings. The young officer was right. The Corvani had positioned their command vessels to protect each other from external threats. But this protection created a vulnerability that could be exploited by ships already inside their formation. It was like a fortress with walls that faced outward, but no protection on the inside. "Show me," Kane ordered. Nash's fingers flew over his controls, highlighting the tactical display. Here, sir. If we can get our remaining ships to this point, we can fire directly at their command cluster without their shields interfering. But we'd have to thread the needle between their overlapping defensive fields. Kane studied the display and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The maneuver Nash was suggesting had never been attempted before because it was essentially impossible. It would require perfect timing, absolute coordination, and ships that could maneuver with surgical precision while under heavy fire. 1. Mistake would mean instant death for everyone involved. But then, Kane thought about Earth burning behind them, about the billions of people who had died in the Corvain invasion, about the crews of the 9 ships they had already lost. Sometimes impossible was the only option left. He opened a channel to the Phoenix and Lightning. The only other human ship still operational. Rose, Patricia, I need you to listen carefully. We have one chance to end this fight, but it's going to require everything we have. Captain Rose Chen's voice came through the static. We're listening, Marcus. What do you need us to do? Kane explained Nash's discovery and the maneuver they would need to execute. The silence that followed stretched. For long seconds, as both captains absorbed what he was asking of them, Captain Patricia Wong spoke first from the Lightning. That's completely insane, Admiral. The margin for error is essentially 0. I know, Kane replied. But if we can pull it off, we can take out their command structure and break their fleet coordination. Without central command, they'll be scattered and vulnerable. And if we can't pull it off? Chen asked. Kane looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all listening to the conversation, all understanding what was being asked of them. If we can't pull it off, we die fighting instead of running. That's still better than letting these bastards win. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Then Navigation Officer Rachel Stone spoke up from her station. Sir, I can plot the course. It won't be easy, but I think I can thread us through their defensive grid. Chief Miller's voice crackled through the intercom. Engines are running on fumes and prayer, but I can give you one more burst of maximum power. After that, we'll be dead in space. Kane felt a surge of pride in his crew. They all knew this was probably a suicide mission, but they were volunteering anyway, because that's what humans did when their backs were against the wall. They fought. All right, people, Kane said into his communicator. This is it. We're going to form up in spear formation and make one final run at their command cluster. Rose, Patricia, follow my lead and stay tight. We only get one chance at this. As the 3 remaining human ships began moving toward the gap in the Corvani defenses. Kane watched the tactical display as they approached the narrow corridor between overlapping shield generators and weapons platforms. The space they had to navigate was barely wide enough for their ships. Any deviation from their planned course would bring them into contact with defensive fields that would crush them. Instantly, the Corvani had finally realized what the humans were attempting and were redirecting their fire toward the approaching ships. Energy beams and missiles filled the space around them as they accelerated toward the heart of the alien fleet. The Phoenix took a direct hit that knocked out half its weapons, but Chen kept her ship on course. 30 seconds to target Stone. Reported from navigation, Kane opened a channel to Supreme Overlord Thax's flagship. He wanted the alien commander to know exactly who was about to kill him. This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet. You asked to see what humans do when they're cornered. You're about to find out. The channel stayed open as the 3 human ships burst through the final defensive line and found themselves face to face with the Corvani command cluster. The alien command ships were massive, bristling with weapons and armor. But they were not designed to fight enemies at point-blank range. All ships, fire everything, Kane ordered. The combined firepower of the 3 human vessels struck the Corvani. Command ships like a hammer blow. Particle beams and quantum torpedoes tore through alien hull plating and carved deep wounds in their superstructure. The Lightning exploded under concentrated return fire, but not before Captain Wong's final salvo crippled 2 more command vessels. The Phoenix and Defiant continued their attack, pouring everything they had into the clustered enemy ships. Kane watched as explosions rippled across the hull of Thax's flagship, and he felt a savage satisfaction as the alien commander's ship began to break apart. But the real victory came when the largest Corvani command ship, the one containing their Central Coordination System suffered a catastrophic reactor failure. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star and sent shockwaves through the entire alien fleet. Without their command structure, the Corvani fleet fell into chaos. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly found themselves without orders or direction. Some continued fighting, others tried to retreat, and still others simply stopped moving altogether as their crews struggled to understand what had happened. Kane looked at the tactical display and realized that they had actually done it. 3. Damaged human ships had somehow managed to break the back of an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. It was impossible, but it had happened anyway because sometimes impossible was just another word for human. The silence that followed the explosion of the Corvani command ship was unlike anything Kane had ever experienced. For the first time in hours, the weapons fire stopped. The constant stream of damage reports from his crew ceased. Even the background hum of the ship's systems seemed muted as everyone absorbed what had just happened. Kane stared at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of the alien fleet. Without their central command structure, the Corvani ships drifted in confusion. Some were trying to regroup, others were fleeing toward the edge of the system. Many simply floated dead in space with their crews, probably arguing about what to do next. The communication officer looked up from her station with something like wonder in her voice. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Corvani vessels. They're asking for terms." Kane almost laughed. After everything that had happened, after all the death and destruction some of the aliens wanted to negotiate, but he wasn't feeling particularly merciful. These were the same creatures who had burned Earth and slaughtered billions of innocent people without offering any terms at all. "Ignore the surrender requests," Kane ordered. "Open a channel to all remaining Corvani ships." The view screen flickered to life, showing Kane's face to every alien vessel in the system. He looked tired and worn. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, but his eyes burned with an intensity that would be remembered for generations. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet," he began, his voice carrying across space to reach every Corvani ship. "3 days ago, your empire attacked my world without warning or provocation. You killed billions of innocent people. You destroyed cities that had stood for centuries. You showed no mercy to children, to the elderly, to anyone who couldn't fight back." Kane paused and let the silence stretch out. In the background, he could hear the quiet sounds of his crew working to keep their damaged ship operational. The Defiant was barely holding together, running on emergency power and the determination of people who refused to give up. "You came here expecting to add humanity to your list of conquered species," Kane continued. "You brought 300 ships against our 12 because you thought numbers were all that mattered. You thought we would surrender when we saw how hopeless our situation was. You were wrong." On his tactical display, Kane could see that the surviving Corvani ships were listening. Some were still trying to flee, but many had stopped to hear what the human admiral had to say. Good. He wanted them to remember every word. "We are the last fleet of a dying species," Kane said, "but we are still here, and you are not. Your command structure is destroyed. Your invasion fleet is scattered. Your supreme overlord is dead. And all of this was accomplished by 12 human ships that you thought were too small to matter." Captain Rose Chen's voice came through the intercom from the Phoenix. "We're receiving long-range sensor readings. There are more Corvani fleets approaching the system. Looks like reinforcements." Kane felt his heart sink for a moment, but then he realized it didn't matter. They had already accomplished what they came here to do. They had proven that humanity wouldn't go quietly into extinction, and that lesson would echo across the galaxy. Regardless of what happened next, "Let them come," Kane said quietly to Chen. Then he turned back to address the alien fleet. "I know you have reinforcements coming. I know you probably have enough ships to finish what you started here. But before you make your next move, I want you to think about something." Kane stood up from his command chair and faced the view screen directly. Behind him, his bridge crew continued their work with quiet professionalism. These people had been through hell and were still functioning, still fighting, still refusing to break. "Look around you," Kane told the aliens. Look at what 12 human ships did to your mighty fleet. Look at your dead command vessels and your scattered forces. Now imagine what we could do if we had 100 ships, or 1,000, or 10,000. The tactical officer called out softly from his station. Sir, several more Corvani vessels are powering down their weapons and beginning to withdraw from the system. Kane nodded but kept his attention on the view screen. You see, the thing about humans is that we learn from our mistakes, adapt. We get stronger, and we remember. Every ship you destroyed today, every person you killed, every world you burned, we will remember all of it. Chief Miller's voice came through the intercom. Admiral, the reactor is stable, and we've managed to restore partial power to the forward sections. We're not going anywhere fast, but we're still in one piece. Thank you, Tom, Kane replied. Then he returned his attention to the alien fleet. Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to take your remaining ships and leave this system. You're going to return to your empire and tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain how a small human fleet destroyed your invasion force and killed your supreme overlord. Kane paused and let a cold smile cross his face. And then you're going to recommend that the Corvani Empire never ever attack human space again. Because if you do, we'll be ready for you. And next time, we won't just have 12 ships. The communication ended, and the view screen went dark. Around the bridge, Kane's crew looked at him with expressions ranging from admiration to exhaustion. They had done something that would be remembered forever, but the cost had been almost everything they had. Over the next several hours, surviving Corvani ships gradually withdrew from the system. Some left immediately after Kane's speech. Others waited until their reinforcements arrived and then departed without engaging. Word of what had happened spread quickly through their fleet. And apparently nobody wanted to be the next commander to face human wrath. Captain Chen brought the Phoenix alongside the Defiant so their crews could assist with repairs. Both ships were heavily damaged, but they were alive and still functional. More importantly, they had proven something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. 3 weeks later, as the two ships limped back toward human space, they received word that the Corvani Empire had officially withdrawn from all human territory and was offering reparations for the invasion. Other alien powers were suddenly much more interested in establishing diplomatic relations with humanity rather than testing their military strength. The Battle of the Last Stand, as historians would later call it, had lasted less than 8 hours. 12 human ships had faced 300 alien vessels and somehow emerged victorious. The tactical innovations developed during the fight would revolutionize space combat for generations. And the story of human determination in the face of impossible odds would inspire countless others, but Kane knew the real victory wasn't tactical or strategic. It was something simpler and more profound. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. They had proven that sometimes the smallest force could carry the greatest wrath, and that wrath could change everything years later. When the memorial was built in Earth's orbit to honor the crews of the 10 ships that didn't come home, Kane would stand before it and remember the faces of the people who had died to save their species. The inscription was simple. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options, but they were human, and that was enough. The fleet had been small, but it had carried human wrath. And that wrath had echoed across the stars until even the mightiest empires learned to respect the species that refused to surrender. In the end, that was all that mattered.